And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The House hath moved the rescue plan just a little bit closer. Today, the Budget Committee approved the movement of the rescue plan. Party line vote, 19-16 in the House Budget Committee. And I guess, are we surprised? Are we surprised there wasn't one Republican who said, hey, we need this. Hey, we need to give the economy a jolt. We need to help struggling families. We need this. Not one. And you're not going to get any. I don't see any courage. I don't see any backbone. I see ideology. I see we're going to try and make Biden a one-term president. They're playing the calculus, and they're playing the political calculus that their supporters don't want it, which is interesting because the polling all says a little bit differently. Overwhelmingly popular, helping people at the bottom, buoying everyone else up, helping the states so that we don't have massive and drastic cuts, popular with Republican governors, popular with Democratic governors, popular with Republican mayors. So personally, I this is one of those moments where you go, there's something seriously wrong with our electoral system when one of the political parties isn't responsive to the demands and the needs of the mass, not just the mass of one party, but both. It's rare that you get, the kind of bipartisan support that we've seen for this rescue package, because I think people overwhelmingly understand we're in a moment of crisis. We need bold, visionary, transformative action, and not just by giving huge corporations more and big tax cuts to the wealthy, but by actually helping the ham and eggers. So if this is how it has to happen, if this is how it has to go through, so be it. I don't want this. I don't think any rational, sane person does. But when you have one of the political parties who is entrenched in the party of no, I don't know what you do with that. You've got to move where you've got to move, and this is where Biden has got to do what Biden's got to do. Because if you don't get something moving, if you don't save this moment, if you don't take this opportunity to make people's lives better, well, 2022 is going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a horrible time, and then nothing gets done for the rest of his presidency. He's got about 6-8 months. And to be honest, I wish Joe Manchin would stop. I wish he would stop being Joe Manchin. I understand, he's a Democrat from West Virginia. But I wish he would just stop. Get on board, because what's weird is happening. And I was having this conversation a little earlier with a friend who said, we're starting to see some realignment of the parties, and the Democrats had better do something to reclaim the working class, as I've been saying for a very long time. They need to really be bold on policy that are going to make workers' lives better. And they've done all the other stuff. There's all that other stuff. Most people care about, hey, how do we get food on the table? How do we keep a roof over our heads? How do I have a job that I don't have to worry is going to be gone tomorrow, or I'm going to be fired tomorrow? So for me, a lot of this stuff keeps coming back to the main focus of where I'm usually at, which is, how do we make workers' lives better? How do we pursue those policies that are going to do the right thing? And a big part of it, starts with, getting this coronavirus under control. That's the only way we're going to be able to build back better, is if we get this under control. Sadly, today marked the milestone of 500,000 Americans dead. I guess it's worldwide over 2.5 million. Numbers not looking like we might be heading down They're saying some good things about the vaccine. That if maybe if you've had it before, you don't have to get both doses. There's some studies on that say that it's kind of like a booster. It'll help. We got to get moving much faster though. There still has to be that. I'm still waiting to find out, when are we opening up the auditoriums to have people start marching through. 6 feet away, of course. But when do we start doing that? When do we start getting mass opportunities? And Meghan McCain took a whole bunch of you-know-what today. And to be honest, not a huge Meghan McCain fan, to be honest. But a little snotty. The "do you know who I am" kind of take. She's like, I'm Meghan McCain. I don't know when I'm going to get my vaccine, and that's just wrong. And I agree. I mean, the reality is the fact that there isn't a plan in place really that I can go and go, okay, I'm going to be eligible at this period of time. That's easily accessible. And maybe it's out there and I just haven't found it. And please, if it is, by all means, send it to me because I would like to find out. But Meghan took a beating today. And like I said, rightfully so, for the "do you know who I am" attitude. But she's like, look, I'm the co-host of The View. I should know. I should be able to go get my vaccine. And we all should. So for me, it's about, look, I'm come on, Joe. You got to call out the National Guard, call somebody out. Let's get this stuff rolling. But today, there was a candlelight vigil. The Biden, the First Lady, the Vice President, and the First Gentleman, all out for a moment of silence. That was great. All that, what they're supposed to do. But let's get going. Let's get rolling. Because we need to. And look, this isn't the only crisis going on. We now have still a humanitarian crisis in the southern U.S. as Texas still has millions of people who don't have safe drinking water. And so over the weekend, all I saw were stories of Ted Cruz, going out trying to be the good Texan now. After he went, for his little jaunt to Cancun, thought no one would notice. What I thought was equally interesting is that the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, and his wife, they went to Utah during the big Texas freeze. That didn't get as much attention as Ted Cruz going to Cancun. I guess partially because Utah is still cold, but they have electricity because they're on the western half of the country who still has power, and when they need it, they can move it around because they're part of the west side grid, unlike Texas, who's on their own. So it's one of those things where you go, I don't know, am I going to give the Attorney General a pass? And the answer is no. No, because he's not going to do what needs to be done, and that's to get to the bottom of all of the criminals who are responsible for this. Because to be honest, there isn't a single criminal. It's the entire Republican Party, a good number of the Democrats, and all of the people who have pandered to these rich, extremely powerful oil billionaires. Going all the way back, to the 1950s. And, I remember, as I was reading the article with Rick Perry saying, we don't need no stinking government. We'll go cold for a little bit. And I'm going, hold on, restate that again. You'll make sure that you go without the power off. You'll be okay with that. And, people freezing to death and dying, you're okay with that just because you don't want no government involved. We don't need no stinking government. Is that what I'm getting? And interestingly enough, yes, Rick Perry did say something along those lines. Now, what's interesting again to me is it's not just, you can't just go, it's one person. It's not the current governor now, although he is to blame. Abbott is most certainly to blame. You can't go to the last governor. Rick Perry was most certainly to blame. Can't go to one of them before that, George W. Bush, most certainly to blame. You could go all the way back to the beginning. They're all to blame. And it got me thinking about a letter that Dwight Eisenhower had written to his brother, Edgar. And it's one of these quotes that I just find so perfect for today. He said, anyone and he wrote his brother saying that anyone who would come out against labor laws, unemployment insurance, Social Security, the Farm Bill, any of those New Deal-esque programs, they'd never be heard from in our political history. He goes on to say there are a couple, big business people, big billionaires, some Texas oil men, and some people in that realm. He said their numbers are negligible, and they are stupid. And I've been saying this for the longest time. Stupid is running the Republican Party. Stupid has been running our government for a very long time because they've gotten us convinced. Hey, we don't expect government's bad. They don't do anything right. And you go, well, yeah, look at what we get. And it feeds that frame. See, government's bad. Government doesn't work. When the reality is they've been undermining all of this for decades. This didn't just happen. The failure to have the vision and the foresight of what we're going to need into the future, that's not just one person. That's infected the country. And the weird thing is when I read the article over at The Guardian with Rick Perry, basically saying, look, we'll freeze to death before we get government. We don't need no stinking socialism. We don't need no stinking regulations. Is that there are people who believe this. There are people who, to their core, that's right, I'll freeze, let the kids freeze to death. Because somehow having government regulations is worse than freezing to death. Which is frightening to think that they've done such a good job of convincing the working people of this country that they are on their side. And, as this friend of mine, pointed out today, he said, there's a shift of, some working people, like 10%, identifying as Republicans. And you could come up with and surmise a whole bunch of reasons. Is it the race issue? Is it, the gender stuff? Is it any of that? It could be all of that. But it could also be the fact that the Democrats have not been the party of working people for a while. And that we really need to be that New Deal party. We need to be that party that makes people's lives better, which, again, I go back to the beginning of this, why it's important that they pass this rescue package through and we get money into people's pockets and we start doing things that need to be done. And then on the heels of this, we need a massive infrastructure bill. We need to start rebuilding stuff. We need to create jobs. We need to do all of those things, and quickly. Because like I said, you got about a year. 2022 starts at the end of the year. At the end of this summer, right around Thanksgiving, people are ramping up for the 2022 elections. And Republicans understand this. And they understand that, look, the Democrats hold a 50-50 lead in the Senate. They're playing the long game because they understand. They understand that in the long run, people are going to be hungry on the short term, and they're going to continue to vote as they're feeling. And I believe that, the Reagan thing of, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And clearly the answer in 2020 was, no, I'm clearly right now worse off. The economy's in the tank. We're over 400,000 people dead. The pandemic is raging, and you've got an administration that's still fibbing about it. And oh, by the way, we had an insurrection that almost overthrew our government. So I would argue, no, we're not better than we were in 2016. So a lot of people were like, we need change. And now Biden and the Democrats have to deliver. It's one thing, nice, happy, rosy rhetoric. It's actually getting something done. Moving to get stuff done. Don't get into petty squabbles. Don't get into petty fights, but actually getting stuff done. And for me, it all comes back down to the Carville, which I'm not a huge James Carville fan, but he was right. It's the economy, stupid. It's always the economy, stupid. It'll always be the economy, stupid. And it's going to be the economy, stupid. So the focus should then be, how do we get people back to work? How do we solve some of our big problems? And understand there are a bunch of problems on the horizon. There are a bunch of things that are coming that are going to have to be dealt with, and I'm happy Joe Biden is president. Because out of this pandemic, understand, once we do, quote unquote, reopen, life is not going back to 2019. We're not going back to the old days. There is going to be major transformational change. Out of every pandemic, there's major transformational change. There are major things that change. And don't know what that's going to be yet. I have some of my suspicions on the employment front, what life is going to look like, 21, 22 and beyond. And it's not good. I have some fears of how things are shaping up, globally because of this pandemic and because of the Trump failure over the last 4 years to engage. That has left a massive void that the Chinese filled for those 4 years. I have some real concerns, and this is where Biden has to exert actual leadership. And to this point, I'll be honest, I'm happy with where he is. I think he has moved as well as possible given the circumstances. Going to have to pick it up. We got to get these vaccines out. And I know it's easier to say it than it actually is to do it, but appearances matter. And giving people a sense of when they're going to be able to get in line or when they're going to be able to get the needed vaccine, I think goes a long way. Now, are there going to be some nitwits who go, I'm not getting that stinking vaccine? I've met a bunch of them. And that doesn't mean our work stops. That just means we skip right over them. And that's going to be a problem down the road for employment as well. Something else that we're going to have to deal with. But yeah, we've got lots of things, lots of problems, lots of things to go on. Got to get this administration moving. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about Merrick Garland. Today's hearing, I thought Merrick Garland did a really good job. I think he's going to be an incredible attorney general. I would have preferred him on the Supreme Court, to be honest, when he should have been on the Supreme Court. But I think he will make a good attorney general. When we come back, Dr. Allison Gill is going to be here to share some thoughts on that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2004. That was the day Secretary of Education Rod Page stated that he considered the National Education Association to be a terrorist organization. He made the remarks during a meeting with governors who were visiting the White House. His apology a few hours later was just as inflammatory. There he expressed his frustration at the, quote, obstructionist scare tactics the NEA's Washington lobbyists have employed against No Child Left Behind's historic reforms. Representing almost 3 million educators, the NEA had been fighting many aspects of the No Child Left Behind Act passed by Congress in 2001. The teachers' unions had initially supported the measure, but they came to realize that the act was designed to undermine public education in favor of charter, private, and religious schools. No Child Left Behind mandated regular standardized testing of students. It also threatened financial penalties and school closures. Governors on board with the goals of the act soon grew frustrated. The Bush administration reneged on federal funding necessary for its implementation. The union movement was outraged at Page's smear. John Sweeney, then president of the AFL-CIO, said, quote, the Bush administration would like to label all those who disagree with it as terrorists in order to cover up its policies, which are harmful to working families and to divert attention from its inability to create good jobs. By 2015, the No Child Left Behind Act had received so much criticism from every corner that the Every Student Succeeds Act replaced it. This act retains Common Core standards but transfers school accountability to the states. It is now pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive. In 2017, it was pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the My Pillow guy getting sued. No longer going to be his pillow. It's probably going to be Dominion's pillow by the time they're all done in this. He's being sued for $1.3 billion with a B. $1.3 billion for defamation. You add that up with the $1.3 billion that they're suing Rudy Giuliani for, and the $1.3 billion that they're suing Sidney Powell for, and I'm like, wow. Where did they pull 1.3 number from? And then I hope they don't actually think they're going to get paid. But it'll be fun to watch. I cannot wait. And it will be fun to watch. And here to share some thoughts on, well, the formerly My Pillow guy and all the stuff that happened today. I've asked our good friend Dr. Allison Gill to come talk with us. Dr. Gill is the host of the Mueller She Wrote podcast, also the Daily Beans, all kinds of great stuff that we could get out. Allison, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you. It's good to see your face, Rick.
Good to see you as well again. So what do you think? The My Pillow guy, you're gonna have to find some change in the cushions.
He is in trouble, you saw the way that Fox and Newsmax sort of reacted to the threats. They cowered quite quickly. I feel like Lindell and Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani are going to be a little more defiant. I don't think they'll get 1.3 billion out of each of them, but they apparently should be able to get their additional security covered because they have had multiple death threats to themselves and their families, and probably some damages to their business. But 1.3, I think, is a little high, a little reaching for the stars.
No, look, if you're gonna go, you go big. Make it eye popping, and that's what it is. I'm still waiting for them to go after others. I can't wait for the discovery. Look, I'm not a lawyer, but I can't wait for the news to break on all of the discovery that comes out.
Mm-hmm, right, because people like the My Pillow guy, and I know Lynn Wood is part of this group too. They have mountains of evidence, and they have none.
Yeah.
And if they have any, and if there's any exculpatory evidence on the other side, it will all come out in discovery.
Now, let's talk the other big news today. The Supreme Court ruled that Cy Vance and the folks there in Manhattan get to see the tax returns. I guess my first question, why the hell is it taking so long to get to see these tax returns? We've been talking about these since 2015.
Yeah, well, this particular set of tax returns comes from the accounting firm, Mazars USA. As you know, that went up to the Supreme Court, all the way to the Supreme Court one time, with the argument being that he has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. The Supreme Court said, no, but I'll give you a second chance to come up with a better reason. Kicked it all the way back down to the district court, came all the way back up to the Supreme Court in October of last year. And Cy Vance made a deal. He said, all right, you know what? I won't, you can have the stay on having this subpoena, handing over the stuff in exchange for an expedited schedule, which he got. They got all the briefings in 4 days or 6 days, some inordinately short amount of time. But then they sat on it until today. And I don't know if that was because, John Roberts didn't want to interfere in an election or anything like that. That supposedly could be one of the main reasons that we've waited until today to finally get this ruling. But here it is. And now Mazars has to hand over the goods. But I don't think that it's actually Trump's tax returns in this particular case that Cy Vance is after.
So what do you think he's after? Because I got to tell you, I don't know that there's anything in these tax returns that were put together by a company that doesn't want themselves to go to jail or be sued. So I've never said there was going to be a smoking gun in there. But you got Michael Cohen who's saying he better look for a fitted jumpsuit. He thinks Trump's going to jail and doing actual jail time. I don't believe that. I would love to see it. Still don't believe it. What do you think?
Well, if you look at the subpoena, it doesn't only call for the tax returns. It calls for related schedules, in draft, as filed, and amended tax returns, and then all statements of financial condition, annual statements, periodic financial reports. I think that what Cy Vance waited this long to get was a document that says from Trump's accountants to the Trump organization saying, we don't think it's legal for you to for example, take the easement deduction on Seven Springs Estates. We don't think it's legal for you to do this. We don't think it's legal for you to do that. If you can get that document that shows intent, that Trump actually knew that he was breaking the law when he was that he was committing tax fraud, because Trump otherwise could say, I'm the CEO, I don't get involved at the lower levels, my tax accountant said it was fine. That's actually kind of a defense that works a lot of the time. But if you have a document from his accountant to that organization saying, we recommend against this because it violates these particular codes of the IRS tax law, you've got a smoking gun.
So that's where you see it is. As, you think they told him don't do this, he did it anyway, and that's what's going to get him in trouble. He could be the next Leona Helmsley.
Because Vance already has the tax returns. He definitely has the New York State tax returns. He's been getting documents from Deutsche Bank for over a year now. And then, of course, the New York Times came out with their expose on having gotten a hold of Trump's tax returns. He's got the tax returns. That's not, if it was the tax returns he needed, he would have taken a hike on that case a long time ago. He wouldn't have stuck it out to the bitter end. There's something in those documents. Now, I have no proof of this other than the reporting that I just told you. But I think that there's something else in there that goes toward intent.
No, there has to be something more than just, because everyone's saying, oh, he's doing business in Russia. I go, yeah, but that's not illegal. Maybe Iran, if he had some business deal, he was building Trump Iran. I go, okay, that could be problematic. But I just don't see anything being outwardly, the smoking gun in a tax return. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And personally, I'm still hopeful. I'm hopeful that there's some jail time coming. I just don't believe it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, once you get past the fact that even if he's found guilty and convicted, the sentence could be what we saw come out with the sentence for Cohen or Papadopoulos or Manafort, just a very small, short sort of sentence.
Yeah, get a weekend.
We don't know if he's pardoned himself. Yeah, and stuck it into his pocket.
Yeah, or, I don't know if you saw the big news out of Atlantic City last week. They imploded one of the casinos. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be the guy who got to do the plunger. In fact, they did a drawing, and some lucky person won the ability to do the plunge.
Yeah, I actually took that video and put the audio from the end of Fight Club over it and posted it on Twitter. I thought it would get more likes than it did. I happen to really think that was fantastic. But what was really amazing is after that thing hit the ground, all the people cheering and clapping and having a good time. It was a very party atmosphere after that plunger went down.
It's a good celebration. It's like a renewal, if you will. It should be symptomatic for the whole country. Let's move to the big news today. Merrick Garland, before the the Senate Committee on the Justice Committee, the Judicial Committee, I think. Mm-hmm. I had it. I forgot it. He said something today that I think is pretty important. He says that he agrees that we're facing more dangerous period than we faced after Oklahoma City. I lived through that period. I knew a bunch of right-wing militia types. I was really worried for our country at that point. He's saying that it's probably worse than that.
Yeah, and Biden has actually assembled a commission to look into domestic violent extremism and the impact that it has on the country so that hopefully policy can be made going forward. He actually put Josh Geltzer in charge of that committee, who's just one of the brightest minds of our time. He's been on our show a few times on the Daily Beans. And so he's really serious about this, and so is Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland said his top priority is investigating the white supremacist oath keepers and the violent extremists that participated in the siege on our Capitol on January 6th, the seat of democracy. So I'm very excited about the prospect of Merrick Garland being confirmed, and I'm certain he will be.
No, I think he will be as well. I think he'll actually get some Republican votes. I think
so too.
That's one of those things where I go, I wouldn't be surprised if he got, I'm going to go out on a limb, 65 votes.
Yeah, I think 70 plus in the full Senate, and even just in this committee, I think I would bet money that Lindsey Graham will vote to confirm to move his confirmation forward, and I think John Cornyn will also vote to move his confirmation forward, just based on the sort of the way that their questioning went today.
So does Ted Cruz vote for him? After that, what was that today with Ted Cruz?
Oh, well, first of all, I mean, there was a lot today with Ted Cruz, but he got really upset with Merrick Garland because Merrick Garland would refuse to commit to not fire Durham, who was appointed special counsel to look into the origins or the oranges of the Russia investigation, if you will. And Merrick Garland wouldn't commit to it. He said, no, I don't know the facts in that investigation. I don't know what's going on. I can't make that commitment, although I don't see a problem with that investigation going forward. And I'm not going to tell Joe Biden what to do either way, and he's not going to tell me what to do either way. I'm committed to an independent Department of Justice, which I think is the number one key thing here, that and the racial equity issues that he's going to be tackling in the Civil Rights Division.
Right. Now, for me, he's like kind of the guy you wanted on the Supreme Court, because there were some things about him I wasn't thrilled about. He's a dead centrist, or at least he appears to be in this day of extremism, and I think that came out today.
Yeah, I think it did too, although I was really a little bit taken aback by his answer about the death penalty. When asked about the death penalty, I believe it was Tom Cotton who asked him about it, and he said because he did support it for McVeigh, right, in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Right.
But he says, lots has happened in the last 20 years. And now I am more hesitant, and I haven't decided whether I'm going to tell Biden I think he should put a moratorium on all the death penalty or not. But if Joe Biden decides to do that, then I'm the top cop. That's the law that I have to enforce, and I'm an independent Justice Department. So be it. But he's changed his mind on the death penalty since McVeigh.
Yeah, I mean, I would have let McVeigh rot in prison. I wouldn't have. I'm against the death penalty because my view is too many poor people get it and not enough rich people. If we were doing rich people, you might convince me. That doesn't happen. And the other thing is, and this is where I'm cruel. I think it's the easy way out. I think you should spend the next however many years locked in a box, and never seeing freedom or tasting freedom again.
Right, and he also wants the life in prison without the concept of parole to not be the bottom line standard. Merrick Garland wants the individual judges and juries to be able to make that determination whether there's no opportunity for parole. So interesting, very interesting discussion today. And I thought he hit all the points that needed to be hit. And I think he did really, really well in the face of some rather ignorant questions.
Well, which one do you think was the most ignorant?
I think when Ted Cruz decided to roll up the Steele dossier in
Ted
his
Cruz.
Assumption question, where he said, so, you think basically that, that there was a deep state and that the Russia investigation was opened because of what was in the Steele dossier, which is all Russian disinformation. That assumes like 9 wrong things. But Merrick Garland took the question and said, look, I'm an independent Justice Department. I go after criminals and crimes, and that's how it goes. And if, yes, we need to look at the FISA court and make sure that that's operating properly. Like, your question is, it's political and prejudicial and ridiculous. And the answer is still the same. I would be the Attorney General, equal justice under the law, apply the laws correctly and equally with equitable application. The end. Like, none of your weird Steele dossier stuff makes a difference to me in my head, basically.
No, and the Cruz bit, got me because, he goes and he says, well, during the Obama years, we weaponized the Office of Attorney General. I'm going, did we? Did you forget Billy Barr? Yeah, did you forget that?
When he said, would you call Joe Biden would you be his wingman? And I really wanted Merrick Garland to say something like, oh, not like Roy Cohn or anything, but, I mean, it was just absolutely like, I think Ted Cruz may have been in Cancun for the last 3 years.
And I'm okay with him going and staying. I wish he would have stayed.
The entire Bill Barr situation.
Now, I did find it interesting that Garland said that both he and Biden opposed the defund the police stuff. I actually oppose defunding the police as well. In my neighborhood, everyone's got "we support the police" signs everywhere. And I do too. I support the police when they're not wrong. And I think that should be the distinction. But the idea of defunding it, I think we should be, as Biden has said, putting more resources into the things that we absolutely need. I just think that's the wrong frame all across the board. Yeah, you can obviously differ, so go ahead.
Well, the way I understand it, to defund the police is what it means is to take a lot of the militarization of the police and a lot of the money that shouldn't go to the police and put it into resources like mental health support, rehabilitation. I think what some people call defunding the police is really just reforming or reimagining. So I do support that. It's been working in places where it's been pilot tested, where you send out mental health professionals instead of armed officers to certain things, and it frees up the officers. For a very long time, police officers didn't want to be responding to things that didn't require force or cops. And so I think that if we frame it properly, I think most people are on the same page with that.
And that's the important part, the framing part of it. Because I actually do know people who think they've taken the defund to the abolish stage. We should need to get rid of them. And I'm going, the reality is while it may sound like a great idea, politically it's a loser, just like defunding the police politically is a loser. I say we hold them accountable. We give them the resources, because I'm 100% with you. My local little sleepy town doesn't need a freaking tank.
No.
Right there.
No. San Diego didn't need one.
But we've got one. We've got a tank.
Yeah, I remember the tank chase, the very famous tank chase. But yeah, for me, for me personally, that's the same vision there. I didn't feel like I was in any position to tell anyone what to call their movement. I could see it being grabbed onto and glommed onto by the right, and misused and sort of twisted into something that it wasn't, and that's what they did. But I think that was asked and answered.
Yeah. So you think he's going to get through?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think he'll get through, no problem. He'll get out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, no problem. And I think he'll get the floor vote. I think 70 plus.
All right. Well, we will see. I'm hoping so that we can begin the investigations and all those traitors and all the people who invaded our Capitol and defecated on our floor and urinated on desks. I want to see massive perp walks. I want to see large trials, and I want to see lots of people in jumpsuits, led by Donald Trump. That would be fabulous. But yeah. Dr. Gill, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. As always, really fun talking with you.
It's been really great talking to you too, Rick. I appreciate the time.
Thanks so much. You listen to the Rick Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that the shoemakers of Lynn, Massachusetts walked out on strike. The shoemakers were very concerned over how technology was changing their work. Shoemaking had long been considered a skilled craft. Making shoes was typically done as piecework in the homes of the craftsmen. Often, other family members, including the women of the household, helped to make the shoes. But technological advances transformed the industry. The introduction of the Singer sewing machine in 1852 moved more shoemaking into factories. Many young women went to work stitching at these machines. What was once considered highly skilled work was now transforming into mass production. Then, to make matters worse, in 1857, a depression swept across the nation. Shoemakers saw their wages slashed. In response, on George Washington's birthday, the shoemakers went out on strike. They demanded an industry-wide standard wage. 20,000 workers joined the strike. 20,000 more supported the striking workers at protests and parades. 2 weeks into the conflict, women from the factories took to the streets, joining the strike. But the male shoemakers were weary of joining their cause to that of the women. Predictably, this division aided in causing the strike to falter and fade. Although the strike was not successful, it drew national attention to the plight of workers. During the conflict, presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln spoke out in support of the workers. He said, "I'm glad to see that a system of labor prevails in New England in which laborers can strike when they want to, where they are not obliged to labor whether you pay them or not. I like a system that lets a man quit when he wants to and wish it might prevail everywhere." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm looking forward to seeing Crazy Pack. CPAC is firing up this week. All of the right-wing, all the right-wing nut jobs are going to be there. And it's going to be interesting for me to see, how far they go. Because they're kind of the bellwether. They're kind of the standard setter of where the Republican Party is going to go. They've invited Trump to come speak, which should be fun. Again, I'm looking forward to seeing him coming out of his rabbit hole, and where they're going to go. The big story, today was that they've evidently yanked somebody who, not the greatest background. He's had tons of anti-Semitic and pro Pizzagate posts and just some really far out stuff. So are they trying to rein in a bit of sanity, or are they just trying to get rid of the most far out of the most far out? Going to be interesting to see. Honestly, this is one of those moments for me where you look at it and you go, okay, who are they going to be? Who are they going to try and remake themselves into? Because this is like the first big, coming out after the loss. And I'm actually going to be kind of interested to see what Trump has to say. This may be one of those speeches. I know it's hard to believe. This may be one of those speeches that I actually watch. I may be interested in what Trump has to say, to see what direction he leads the crazy half of the Republican Party. And that's going to tell us a lot of where policy things are going to go. Because, like it or not, he's still a driver. I mean, at the end of the day, he's still very popular, and his popularity among Republicans is growing now, the further away from January 6th that we get. And the fact that, he was impeached, and you got more Republican votes than anybody ever thought possible. He still wasn't convicted, and at the end, that's all people are saying, hey, he wasn't convicted. And I said from the beginning of both impeachments, there wasn't a snowball's chance of him being convicted. There wasn't. The fact that impeached twice, and probably could have been impeached for a whole bunch of other things as well, but just no courage in the Republican Party. So it's going to be interesting to see where CPAC goes. I know I will be tuning in. If it weren't for COVID, I would have liked to have I'd like to go to it. We went to CPAC one year. We spent a day there. I guess it's back 2012, I think it was. And, we just had some of the most entertaining, insane conversations. But that party was saner than this one. So I'm anxious to see what they come out with. Going to be that simple. Now back to the Merrick Garland thing for a minute. I was watching some of the highlights, and there are a couple of things in there that Garland said that I think are important, and one of them being, something that I've wanted to see for a while is, since January 6th, I don't know that there's been enough attention paid to who funded these organizations, who's the money behind these groups. And I've been saying for a very long time, I believe it's not member dues. It's not them chipping in and passing the helmet. It's not that. Somebody's funding it. And we found out that the woman who's the owner of Publix is funding Alex Jones to some huge, incredible numbers. that's where I think you have to go. If you're going to break down what has been a major fascist movement to overthrow our government and to restructure our government, and I've been saying this for decades, that we need to find out who's funding all of these right-wing organizations and uncover this secret money. With the passing of Limbaugh, people are going, well, Rush Limbaugh was a radio genius. And he was. He was good at what he did. But he was everywhere where he was because the moneyed interests wanted him there. They spent billions propping him up. And that's something that's never talked about. Now, granted, he was a pitchman. He was a snake oil salesman. He understood how to pitch products. But ultimately, he was put in that place to do exactly what he did, and masterfully. And you go back and you read the Powell memo from 1971, and how they systematically, the wealthy in this country, systematically reclaimed capitalism for themselves. We're in this moment where mission accomplished, man. Break out the Bush banner, get the sock for the drawers, the whole 9 yards. They've accomplished what they set out to do. And if you read that document, it's like a roadmap on how we got to where we are. They have systematically dismantled institutions. They have systematically reframed people's thinking, especially workers. I'm growing more distressed by the moment as I talk to people who they're just an average everyday working person like I am, who doesn't quite understand that there's no benevolent employer. There's no one who gives you things out of the goodness of their heart. That the things that they take for granted today, people fought and bled and died for yesterday. And we're moving to a weird spot. And in the next hour, I'm going to talk a little bit about the gig economy and what's coming. But we're in this moment. We're in this an interesting moment where we've been sold this very pro-corporate, very big business, very wealth class mentality that we can all be billionaires. We can all be Jeff Bezos. You just have to work hard enough. And it's a lot of the same rhetoric that we heard 100 years ago, when the company stores kept people indebted for their entire lives, where no matter how hard you worked, you never got out of debt to the company store. No matter what you did, you never got out. And we're moving back to that moment. I was telling my daughter, I guess it was yesterday we were talking about this. And I said, look, the sad thing is her generation doesn't have the ability to be a screw up like I was. There aren't the kind of paths towards the middle class that there were then. Look, I believe if you work hard, you can do okay now. But that window's closing, especially as everything that I understood is changing. Now, look, a handful of people do really well in these new gig jobs. A handful of people do really well in these things, in social media influencer handfuls. They do really well. But for the mass of people, they don't. And when you talk, macro size economy stuff, how do we sustain a working class and make sure that people have roofs over their heads and food on the table? And how do we make sure that we get education and we get health care and we get, all of the things that a society needs to stay functional and not ripping each other apart? We're struggling. The fact that the Democrats right now have to move that rescue plan through a budget reconciliation process and it not have broad bipartisan support is insane to me. There had been a point in our country's history, and I remember after 9/11, where everybody came together and we need to do things. That was very short-lived. I remember during the Bush years, when the Bush collapse happened, you had a bunch of Democrats who went along with Bush's bailouts because the country needed it. But interestingly enough, and yeah, I'm going to spin this back the other way. Interestingly enough, when it was the Democrats saying, no, we need massive investments, you got nothing from the Republicans. During the Obama years, you got nothing from them other than obstruction. So Trump comes in. We then have the virus, another major catastrophe. Again, in my view, another one that could have been avoided. Not be in the position that we're in, we would have gotten hit, but I don't think it'd have been as bad as it is now. I don't think we'd have 500,000 dead if there was someone who, at the beginning, did the right things. Other than, well, it's all going to be gone by summertime. And the Democrats again came to their aid. Whatever you need, we will pass anything you want to help people. We will get anything you want done to move our country forward. And it was Mitch McConnell who stood in the way. And as I've said for a very long time, I believe the Republican Party is the party of scorched earth. They are never going to be the ones who allow average, everyday working people to do better, which is just the weirdest kind of Stockholm syndrome mentality of seeing the numbers of people switching to the Republican Party. And again, it comes back down to, what's the matter with Kansas? What is it that people are focused on? And the Republican Party is always good at choosing those divisive issues that keep people just interested enough to voting for them without holding them accountable for how bad the economy is for them. And, obviously we're going to see over the next couple of weeks if the Senate does anything, if we get any Republican senators to say, yeah, we need to get this rescue package out. To be honest, the gang of 10 that went to see Biden with their I'm not even going to call that alternative offer because it wasn't even an actual offer. That was not going to be helpful. And I think Biden understands his presidency depends on bold action. His presidency depends on getting this economy going. So look, I'm hopeful. We need bipartisan support. And maybe the next time, maybe the infrastructure bill will come. But here again, this is another one of those things that in my lifetime, I remember there being broad support for paving roads and building bridges. And I remember there being broad support for politicians who wanted to bring home the bacon. They had their pet projects. They got their pork spending. They got what they needed to bring something home. And that's how we built, museums and schools and hospitals and roads to nowhere that eventually led somewhere. That's how we got broadband access. And that's how we got a lot of the things that we, again, take for granted. We used to be functional. For far too long, we've been existing on the machine running itself. Well, we're breaking down. The parts are wearing out. And that shows in every time you see these polls that show the country split in half. Which is why, again, I think Biden has the opportunity, if he does the right things over the next couple of months, with or without the Republicans. At this point, you've got to take the reins and you've got to move forward. Which is why I'm in favor of doing away with the filibuster. And yes, I do know that means if McConnell takes office, takes control in 2 years, and a Republican takes control in another 3 or 4 years, we end up, undoing everything and going back. I understand we then become this banana republic of wide swings in ideology and wide swings in policy. And I don't want that. But we got to get back to somewhere near the sane line. And you look at times when our country was somewhat saner, somewhat more prosperous for working people. And that was an era where we had strong unions, we had high tax policies on the rich, and we had education programs that were accessible. Now, let me add the caveat into that always has to be thrown in. Was it inclusive for everyone? No. But going forward, we make sure that it is. And yes, there is some idealizing of the 50s and 60s that, Hollywood has done a great job of. But you had a period in time where one income could support a family. You could buy a house. You could buy a car. There was that economic possibility. And I talk, about, when I started working. When I started working, the first job I had in the freight industry paid 5 times what the minimum wage was. It's now down to 3.5 times the minimum wage. It was better before. Workers had more income. I personally believe if we get back to that point where we have families that have better incomes, have more disposable income, have more opportunities, we're going to see the country come back together. When people can afford to keep a roof over their head and afford the idea of there being a future, they're not so keen on tearing down today. And that's part of where I'm at, and part of where I think as a nation, and Joe Biden needs to lead us. This is right now his moment. And this is right now the moment for the Democrats to figure out what kind of a party are they going to be? Are they going to be a party that leads, or are they going to get mired in Joe Manchin holding up a couple of nominations because he has a problem with some tweet? I mean, it's incredible to me that he's not going to vote for Neera Tanden because of a couple of tweets, but Brett Kavanaugh was okay. I mean, I'm struggling with that one. So it's going to have to be a matter of Democrats got to get their you-know-what in order and get moving in the right direction. And we need action soon because it could be a very short-lived majority if things don't get better and people's lives don't get better. Because, look, you're already hearing it. You're already hearing people squabbling because, hey, they want stuff now. That's why we got to move. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968, and striking sanitation workers staged a sit-in at the city council meeting in Memphis, Tennessee. The striking workers were members of AFSCME Local 1733. They had been on strike for 10 days. Their demands included union recognition, a pay increase, a grievance procedure, and end to workplace discrimination. Also at issue was workplace safety. February 1st, 1968 was a rainy day. 2 black sanitation workers, Ethel Cole and Robert Walker, sought shelter from the heavy rain in the only place city rules allowed them to be, in the back of their garbage truck with the trash. Tragedy struck, and both men were crushed to death due to faulty equipment. The strike started soon after. At the city council sit-in, hours passed with neither side backing down. As the hours wore on, the union brought in sandwiches for their members. Finally, the city council capitulated, but the mayor of Memphis still refused to recognize the union. The sanitation workers' struggle garnered the attention of civil rights leaders, including Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King came to Memphis to support the striking workers. While on the trip, King was assassinated coming out of the Lorraine Motel. As the country mourned Dr. King's death, the strike wore on, lasting 65 days before the city settled under heavy pressure from Washington, D.C. Memphis officials met most of the strikers' demands. During the strike, the black sanitation workers carried a sign that read simply, "I am a man." Pickets with this simple, dignified, and powerful statement became one of the iconic images of the civil rights movement. The slogan is still used today at civil rights and labor marches. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
Many Americans can't believe that political coups are part of our country's history. But consider the Wall Street Putsch of 1933. Never heard of it? It was a corporate conspiracy to oust Franklin Roosevelt, who had just been elected president. With the Great Depression raging and millions of families financially devastated, FDR had launched several economic recovery programs to help people get back on their feet. To pay for this crucial effort, he had the audacity to raise taxes on the wealthy, and this enraged a group of Wall Street multimillionaires. Wailing that their, quote, liberty to grab as much wealth as possible was being shackled, they accused the president of mounting a class war. To pull off their coup, they plotted to enlist a private military force made up of destitute World War I veterans who were upset at not receiving promised federal bonus payments. One of the multimillionaire's lackeys reached out to a well-respected advocate for veterans, retired Marine General Smedley Darlington Butler. They wanted him to lead 500,000 veterans in a march on Washington to force FDR from the White House. But they chose the wrong general. Butler was a patriot and lifelong soldier for democracy who in his later years was critical of corporate war profiteering, and he was repulsed by the hubris and treachery of these Wall Street aristocrats. He reached out to a reporter, and together they gathered proof to take to Congress. A special congressional committee investigated and found Butler's story, quote, alarmingly true, leading to public hearings with Smedley Darlington Butler giving detailed testimony. This is Jim Hightower saying, by exposing the traitors, this courageous patriot nipped their coup d'etat in the bud. But their sense of entitlement reveals that we must beware of the concentrated wealth of the imperious rich, for it poses an ever-present danger to your and my majority rule.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Tennessee, 46th in union density. And they want to make sure that they stay there, or they want to compete with South Carolina at dead last. Because as I see, they have they're moving forward on a constitutional amendment in the state to inculcate a right-to-work law in their state's constitution. In fact, tomorrow it's set up for the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee on their calendar. And what it would do is it proposes adding provision establishing right to work regardless of status of affiliation with any labor union or employee organization. They want to make sure that their workers are, well cheated. And here to share some thoughts on this move to put this into the state constitution, I've asked Misty Robertson to come talk with us. Misty's the Communication Workers of America's legislative and political director for the state of Tennessee. Misty, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure.
So walk me through this. We're gonna. Tennessee was one of the first right to work states. Now you want to put it in your state's constitution.
Right. They want to underscore low wages and horrible benefits here in the state of Tennessee. We're already number one in minimum wage jobs in the country, and we rank among one of the worst states for deaths on the job. So, as you know, we are definitely not looking forward to this fight. It seems to be flying like it has wings right through the state Senate of Tennessee. So we're trying to attack it on the House side and get that killed in committee.
Now, one of the things that when I first saw this, I'm going, well, what happens if Joe Biden does, by some miracle of miracles, and the Democrats get their ducks in a row, and they repeal Taft-Hartley with the PRO Act, as some have suggested is possible, and they do away with the right to work status. Does federal law supersede the state's constitution in that order?
It does. It will supersede the state's constitution. So my question was, then why would they be working so hard to pass this? And what I was told by the NLRB legal team is that what would happen if a company refuses to bargain the fair share amount that the non-members have to pay, stating that the state's constitution says we're right to work, then the labor union would then have to go through a court process with that company that can be tied up sometimes up to 10 years.
Right.
And, of course, that costs that labor union a lot of money to fight.
So it's really about just chewing up resources and having worker organizations spin their wheels.
Exactly.
And we're seeing that all across this country. I mean, the moneyed interests, like the people at the Freedom Foundation and the National Right to Work Committee, this is what they've made hay doing over the last 30 years, and it's where they've made their bones. And now look, they've moved much further, but their main goal is frivolous lawsuits and chewing up time, energy, and resources.
Yeah. And ALEC has been working really hard to pass, hundreds of pieces of legislation every year, and a lot of those ALEC bills include money that they get from, they work for energy companies and that lobbies against environmental controls. They also promote a broader economic and deregulatory agenda that's not directly tied to profitability or specific donors. Like they advocate cuts to Social Security, farm subsidies, and unemployment insurance.
Wow. So
it's not just labor unions that are under attack with this stuff. It's Americans in general.
So now, look, I get the argument on this. How is it that the average worker doesn't see the big scheme in this? Because, this is one of the frustrating parts of this. I hear people say, no, like here in Pennsylvania, I fear Pennsylvania is going to be a right-to-work state and join Tennessee in 2023 because I don't know that people really understand what it means and how devastating the effects are for workers. But how is it that we've lost contact with reality on how bad things could actually be and how bad things actually are?
That's a great question, and I wish that we had the perfect antidote to fix that. I think the big thing we have to do is just educate. A lot of people, one problem that I see, look how many folks these days do not have any form of television. People don't watch the news. It could be because they are working 2 and 3 jobs and have kids at home they're caring for. But they don't find the need to pay for, public television a lot of times, and then they get their news from social media, which we know is horrible. So it's just we have to figure out a way to educate folks, because I think that when that happens, that light bulb goes off and they see, the importance of fighting against these horrible bills and laws.
Yeah, I used to believe, Misty, and you can laugh at me for being, just kind of idealistic, but I used to believe that things would get bad, that we would wake up to going, hey, this is really bad. We don't want it to be really bad. And then we would change things. But it just seems that things just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And wages keep getting lower and lower and lower, and working conditions seem to get worse and worse. And all of those things that, maybe 20, 30 years ago you took for granted are disappearing.
Exactly. I am hoping that we pull out of this. Right now, union popularity across the country is at a pretty all-time high that we know of at 65%. I'll say all-time, my time.
Right.
Of course, in the 70s and 60s, it was a little bit higher. But, 65% of people believe that unions should stay around and that they are for, working class people. So that's a good start there. We just have to educate them on how we keep them intact and the attack on unions that is being waged right now.
No, and part of this is, and the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is this right to work kind of language, because, when people who don't know what it is say, oh, well, I should have the right to work. I should have the right to a job. I should have the right, to decent wages. I should have the right, Misty?
That's right. What they don't realize is the right to work. Everyone has the right to work. Right to work is a free rider law where non-union members do not have to pay for the bargaining that their union does for them for their wages, benefits, and protections, nor do they have to participate in funding the defense when they get in some sort of a snafu or trouble at work. So it's free rider law is what right to work means. So fair share is the opposite, and that means, non-members, they are not forced into a union. If a company has a union and they work there, they are required to pay a fair share amount for representation and bargaining help that the company and the union that represents the workers there have come up with. So here in the state of Tennessee, and I'm sure across the country, it is a misnomer that these folks that are pushing this legislation say that, it would take people's ability to work at a company that's union if they don't, join the union, and that's not true. And then, of course, the second big selling point they say is that it attracts businesses to the state. And statistically, we know that that is not true. There's not one chamber of commerce across the country in right-to-work states that can actually say a company located there because that state was right-to-work. Also, statistics show that within 2 to 3 years of a company moving to a right-to-work state, if they're doing that to look for low wages, or if that they're using that as a benefit, within 2 to 3 years, they've moved that work offshore in a lot of cases in search of even cheaper labor, which leaves everybody unemployed.
Right. No, and that's the story I think people need to understand, that, this race to the bottom only takes us further to the bottom.
Exactly.
Which is why, again, I keep coming back to why it's important that we fend this stuff off. Because, interesting that you pointed out from the beginning that this, if there's a way to undo Taft-Hartley and get this PRO Act passed, that it would supersede state law and then this would be gone. But, they've got the alternative plan, which is, they've got the court system. I'll just tie it up and just drain resources.
That's exactly right. That's what they're going for. So, it's a sad shame that working people have to pay for their sinister plans.
Now, we hear a lot. I hear a lot from my conservative friends that, when companies move to right-to-work states, wages are actually higher. And again, it's one of those things where, on its face, you go, wait a second, that doesn't seem even close to reality. What do you say to somebody who goes, because I've had someone tell me this, Rick, in Tennessee, the wages are higher than they are in Pennsylvania.
Oh, definitely not. Again, Tennessee ranks number 1 in the country in minimum wage jobs. 8 of the 10 states with the lowest minimum wages across the country are right to work, and the average worker in a right to work state makes $9,000 a year less than in other states. The median household income in those right-to-work states is 15% less, and 12 of the 14 states with the worst pay gap between men and women are in right-to-work states, because as we know, a union contract is something that evens the playing field between races, between men and women, the things that we want. We want equality when it comes to pay and benefits. When somebody's got the same educational background and doing the same work hour for hour.
Yeah.
So.
No, I sit here with my contract on my desk, and as I say all the time, this contract doesn't know if the person holding it is a man, a woman, black, white, gay, straight. Doesn't know any of that stuff. It just knows whoever's holding this book and doing this job gets this. These are the conditions they work under. This is the pay. These are the benefits. It is what it is.
That's right. Another thing to keep in mind is there's a higher rate of people with no health coverage, health care insurance in right-to-work states. So 16.8% compared with 13% overall have no health care coverage, which also leads to high infant mortality rates. Sorry. And that's about 15% higher in right-to-work states. Not to mention public services like education. 8 of the 10 states that spend the least on public services are right to work, and 9 of the 10 that spend the least on public education are right to work. So if you think about a company or corporation looking to relocate, their children have to go to school too. They have to drive across those bridges and those potholes too. So why would they want to race to state Tennessee to bring their business there just because right to work was added to the state's constitution.
Well,
You got to be pretty low.
That's a good question. But you don't sound like you'd be the economic development cheerleader right now, because it doesn't sound like a lot of great reasons to be going to Tennessee.
Well, I have no issue with economic development. I love business coming here. You know, we need jobs and we need good paying jobs. I just don't agree with the state selling workers down the river, you know, and advertising us as like dumb, cheap labor. And that seems like when you live in the South, that's exactly what you get from your legislators.
Yeah, you're the next stop on the way out of the country, is the way it was always pitched to me. So how can we help? I mean, because I look at this, and this is a battle that I think everybody should be involved in, because if Tennessee can do it, that means any other state's going to do it, and eventually we end up much worse off than we already are. What are you having people do?
Well, this year is the second year that this is being heard in the legislature, so we are hyper-focused on getting with our House members and, letting them know how this could hurt Tennesseans. It needs a 2/3 vote to pass. If it goes through, then next year it'll be on our ballot. So between now and next year, we have to do everything we can to educate Tennesseans on why, when they get to that ballot box and it asks, do you want the right to work added to your state's constitution, we need to tell them to say no and why they need to do that, so that they can have those intelligent conversations. So if you have friends or family in Tennessee, if you have business interest in Tennessee, we've got to spread the word and work on the PRO Act. I mean, try to bend your U.S. senators. It's passing in the House. We know we've got it in the House. It's the Senate that we've got to come through on.
Yeah, it's Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and Mark Warner from Virginia, and there's a couple other ones. Mark Kelly from Arizona. There's some other problems, but you're right. You've got to call them early. Got to call them often, and say, look, this is what we need, because this is part of what we need. This is part of how we close a lot of the problems that we have. We close the economic gap. How we do away with some of the inequality we have. For me, this is the beginning of that. But Misty, I appreciate the thoughts and the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You as well. Again, this is one of those things that you just look at it and you go, you're already the fifth worst state in the country for union density. You've already beaten this dog senseless. And more? And more kind of tells you where their mindset is. And again, sadly, this is about just draining resources. I'm gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna talk a little bit about the gig economy, and how this right to work stuff, the beginning of the end of work as we know it. Quick break, right back.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2004. That was the day Secretary of Education Rod Page stated that he considered the National Education Association to be a terrorist organization. He made the remarks during a meeting with governors who were visiting the White House. His apology a few hours later was just as inflammatory. There he expressed his frustration at the, quote, obstructionist scare tactics the NEA's Washington lobbyists have employed against No Child Left Behind's historic reforms. Representing almost 3 million educators, the NEA had been fighting many aspects of the No Child Left Behind Act passed by Congress in 2001. The teachers' unions had initially supported the measure, but they came to realize that the act was designed to undermine public education in favor of charter, private, and religious schools. No Child Left Behind mandated regular standardized testing of students. It also threatened financial penalties and school closures. Governors on board with the goals of the act soon grew frustrated. The Bush administration reneged on federal funding necessary for its implementation. The union movement was outraged at Page's smear. John Sweeney, then president of the AFL-CIO, said, quote, "The Bush administration would like to label all those who disagree with it as terrorists in order to cover up its policies, which are harmful to working families and to divert attention from its inability to create good jobs." By 2015, the No Child Left Behind Act had received so much criticism from every corner that the Every Student Succeeds Act replaced it. This act retains Common Core standards but transfers school accountability to the states. It is now pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive. In 2017, it was pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're seeing that Amazon's back with they're calling it a bonus, which is a weird thing in my view, like a departure bonus. The idea is if you don't want to work there, and this is something they did a couple of years back, I remember. If you don't want to work there, they'll give you like $2,000 if you've been there for a couple of years. $3,000 if you've been there 3 years, up to $5,000, if you've been there like 5 years or more. And the idea is that if you're dissatisfied with the job, then leave. Here's money, just go. Which I guess is something they got from a company that they acquired, something that they used to do. Instead of, and this is one of those weird kind of bizarre practices that you just go, how is this possible? The conditions are bad in these places. Conditions, every person that I've talked to one-on-one who's worked at an Amazon and said, look, the conditions are horrible. There's stories of, people having to go to the bathroom in bottles because, they don't want to get into trouble because, the quotas are so high that they got to keep running. That they've got, wristwatches that track their every movement. Every step is tracked and timed and mapped out because they want to maximize every second of possible work out of you. And, someone go, well, that's what you're there for. No, you're not a machine. Sorry, not going there. But, they're now offering again to these people in Bessemer, Alabama, a bonus to leave. And as it was explained, first time around from what I had heard, is that, well, you could always come back later. But evidently somewhere in the contract it says you're never going to come back. And look, they're never going to hire you back if you take that money to leave the door. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get the people who are disgruntled to leave so that they don't vote in the union election. This is one of those things that's incredible to me. And look, they've gotten away with before. So you've got people who aren't happy with the working conditions. I've always been someone who believes if you aren't happy with the way things are, you work to change it. You work to make it better. You organize, you negotiate, and you demand better. Nothing's ever given. There's no benevolent employer who's wanting to bestow the wonders of a middle-class existence on us. That doesn't happen. So you got to fight for some things. You organize, you negotiate, and you fight for stuff. What they're doing is going, look, those people who are disgruntled, here's a couple bucks, go away. And because we want things as bad as they've always been. And it's gotten me in this place where, I look at Tennessee pushing an amendment to their constitution to put something that is terrible for workers in their state's constitution, which is putting government directly between you and your boss, saying you cannot negotiate any of the things that you think are important. I'm someone who believes that we should be able to negotiate a closed shop. If a majority of workers say every person in this union should be a dues-paying member to our union, and we're going to negotiate the best contract we can, and you should be able to negotiate that. And if you don't like it, you have the ability to go somewhere else. The same argument that the right loves to throw out about anything else. You have the right to go somewhere else, and you do. But in this country, the law has always been, if you don't want to join, you don't have to be a member. You don't have to believe in the bylaws or do any or participate in any of the union democracy. But you got to pay for what you get. You get better wages, you get better hours, you get better conditions. You get a voice on the job. You get protections that most people don't have. You are now considered a just cause employee as opposed to an at-will employee. Meaning that in order for you to be fired, you had to do something wrong. You had to have screwed up. Instead of at will, which is, I just don't like you today. And for that, you should have to pay for the enforcement of the negotiation and the enforcement of that contract. That's reasonable. But our Supreme Court said on the public sector, the entire country is a no rights at work country. That we can have freeloaders everywhere. And states like Tennessee have put it in their state laws that they're going to allow freeloaders there. Now they want to put it in their constitution. And Misty was right. What they're doing with this is about a giant time suck and a giant money suck for the unions to try and defend. Because Tennessee's already, as she said, one of the lowest paying states in the country, with one of the lowest union density rates in the entire country. So instead of figuring out how to make their schools better, how to make the wages better for their workers, to do any other thing, what they've decided is they're going to continue to push the things that have made things worse. And I've said for a very long time that I think union membership empowers people. I think once you have that sense of empowerment on the job, the ability to change things in your workplace, the ability to have a voice and a say in what happens in what is, at least a third of your life once you hit working age, is empowering. And then you then take that kind of empowerment into everything else you do. This is what the wealth class of this country wants to crush. And what the American Legislative Exchange Council and all of the people that came out of the Powell memo have worked all of these decades to get us to. I'm telling you, right to work laws are horrible for working people. You may not be in a union today. You may never be in a union. But once you destroy union density in your state or in your country, wages go down for everyone across the board. And this is one of those moments where, I think of my aunt, who has never worked a union job, has never had one, would never have had the opportunity to work a union job, but is one of the most pro-union people that I know, because she understands that working people need that bargaining power and that she benefited from it, because if the guys in the plant got a raise, guess what happened? The women in the office got a raise. The men in the office got a raise. Things got better. Lives got better. The boss had to negotiate with somebody. Sadly, we're destroying even that. As we speak, we're catapulting towards this gig economy, where the numbers I saw, something like 50 million people are now engaged in the gig economy. I mean, stop and think about how big that is. You've got the Ubers and the Lyfts and the DoorDashes and all of these on-demand. You're your own boss. You take all the responsibility. You are responsible for all the costs, all of the delays, all of the breakdowns, all of the investment, all of that, and your time. There's no health care. There's no unemployment. There's no workers' comp. There's none of that stuff. But you got to do what I tell you when I tell you and how I'm going to tell you to do it, which is insane. But understand, we're going more towards this. And the more we destroy the union's ability to defend itself and to defend workers, the faster this destruction of the American worker is going to happen. As we speak right now, Amazon is buying up shopping malls. And they're putting, all of their products in these shopping malls, and they've got these are the distribution centers for packages. And you got people buying vans. They're their own boss now. They're the new FedEx driver. They're basically Uber and Lyft for packages. They are going to directly compete with UPS and eventually not just destroy UPS, but destroy FedEx as well. It is a massive race to the bottom where everybody is worse off except for the people at the top. And if at some point we don't figure out how to change this, how to stop this dynamic, we're all going to be working a gig job. Someone was telling me out in California, they're now moving, one of the, the bread distributors is now all independent contractors. So instead of what you used to be, working for, whatever the bread company was, and you had a delivery route, now it's all you're on your own. You get the truck, or you lease the truck from us, and you make your deliveries. And you get paid, off of what sells. They're paying people to come in and stock shelves as independent contractors. The temp agency thing of the past, we're going beyond that. You go on your phone, you're going to have an app. Who needs day labor? We're going to be a society of day laborers chasing one gig after another, day after day. Now, look, there are some people who are going to go, hey, that's great. It gives me some flexibility, lets me be home with the kids. But you know what it also does? It's going to destroy our Social Security system. It's going to destroy Medicare. It's going to destroy everything that this society's been built on so that the billionaires and the rich can have more. And, well, the working people continue to get cheated. And I also love the people, well, I should have the choice. Okay, you can have the choice. But what happens when there are no more jobs? There is no more employment. It's you're going to do this gig job or you do nothing. That's where we're heading. And for me, that's the scary part in this. Look, I want people to put out their own shingle. I want people to be self-employed. I want them to be empowered to do things better and more efficiently. I want them to do well for themselves. The sad reality is there are lots of industries where that doesn't work. And all you're going to do by creating this gig economy in most industries is having a reserve army of low-waged workers. I go back to, we did our labor history tour back in 2013, and we were in Kansas City. And, they took us into the place where the factory had been. And, he said, look out this window. And he said, you see that nice park over there where all the swing sets and the stuff, the monkey bars and all the stuff are? I said, yeah. He goes, back in the 30s, that was full of people. That was full of, thousands of men waiting for someone to scream out the door, you come here. Waiting for someone on the shop floor to get fired, to get sick, to get hurt. So that they discard one and bring in another. That's our history. Only now you're not going to be standing in a field looking at each other. You're going to be sitting at home looking at your phone. That is a scary future. And if you have no one to fight for those people, you have no one to organize those folks and fight for better opportunities, we're going to be no better off than they were back standing in that field. In fact, I'd argue we're much worse off because at least they had the understanding that they were a community. Frightening times ahead. Love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Green News Report special coverage.
This is a life-threatening humanitarian crisis, and it is growing by the hour. Families all over this state doing whatever they can to stay warm and sometimes making deadly choices.
Deep freeze devastates Texas power grid as death toll climbs.
Texas neglected and underinvested in its grid until it finally broke during the storm.
Privatization and deregulation left Texas vulnerable. Plus,
it seems pretty clear that a reckless reliance on windmills is the cause of this disaster. Is that right, do you think?
That is absolutely right.
Absolutely wrong. Right-wingers launched Texas disinfo campaign to attack renewable energy.
All of those misfires and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There's going to be a lot of people now out there trying to say, well, the fossil fuels have also failed.
That's right, because they did fail. Mark Morano, Dead Rush Limbaugh's former producer. You got something against telling the truth? Dumb question, I know. That ain't what the fossil fuel industry pays you for. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. Boy, when this week started, it looked bad in Texas, and it has turned out to be even worse than I think any of us could have imagined.
Yes, the deadly days-long winter weather emergency in Texas and in other states has deepened into a full-blown disaster and humanitarian crisis with national security implications. As we go to air, millions remain without power across the southern and central U.S. The storm and its aftermath have killed at least 30 people, many in Texas. Hundreds have been treated at hospitals for exposure to the cold and for carbon monoxide poisoning as desperate people turn to unsafe measures to keep warm. The Texas power grid buckled because ultra-cold temperatures froze natural gas, coal, and nuclear power plants that are its primary energy sources. The state is suffering water outages because water mains and water treatment plants are literally frozen. Half of the state's 254 counties are experiencing water problems. Dozens of cities, including Houston, have issued boil water notices, but in hard-hit areas, there is no water to boil. Nuclear power reactors were shut down because there is no water to cool the reactors. The state's agriculture commissioner warned of looming food supply problems. Texas military bases have also been severely impacted, harming military readiness. In a press conference on Wednesday, Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott warned that most of the state will remain below freezing through the weekend. Abbott also ordered Texas natural gas producers to sell fuel to in-state power generators.
I have issued an order effective today requiring those producers that have been shipping to locations outside of Texas to instead sell that natural gas to Texas power generators.
Texas can't import power from other states like the rest of the country because in the 1990s, Republican lawmakers deregulated and privatized the state's electric grid to avoid federal regulations, cutting it off and isolating it from the rest of the country. That allowed Texas companies to prioritize profits over maintenance upgrades. So there are no requirements by the state to winterize energy resources.
No requirements, and because they're cut off from everyone else in the country, they can't get help when they need it.
The architect of the state's privatized, deregulated system told reporters that the state's energy market is functioning as it was designed. Even though Texas grid officials have confirmed that the blackouts are primarily due to freezing of gas, coal, and nuclear plants, and that frozen wind turbines were the least significant factor, Republican politicians, Fox News, and right-wing media have sprung into action to deflect responsibility for the cascading consequences of deregulation and privatization, launching a tsunami of misinformation to falsely blame wind energy for the state's grid failure.
That's so unlike them.
Here's Tucker Carlson.
So, unbeknownst to most people, the Green New Deal came to Texas. The power grid in the state became totally reliant on windmills. Then it got cold and the windmills broke.
No, you are not hallucinating. The Green New Deal did not pass. And no, Texas isn't primarily reliant on wind energy.
It didn't come secretly to Texas?
No.
So it's as if Tucker Carlson is just making stuff up?
Yes!
That's so unlike him.
Another storm has hit the south through the mid-Atlantic, with 1/3 of Americans under new winter storm advisories, creating more shortages of natural gas and more extended power outages. The Texas disaster could boost President Biden's proposal to harden the nation's aging electric grid and crumbling infrastructure, but will Republicans heed it?
And will America fall for the lies that are coming out of Texas, coming out of Fox News, trying to blame all of this on renewable energy? That propaganda machine is pretty powerful. For much more on this story and the ones we couldn't get to today because of it, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com, where we are celebrating the 12th anniversary of the Green News Report, and we thank you for stopping by bradblog.com/donate to help us. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's some good news. Evidently, the UN nuclear watchdog group, the International Atomic Energy Agency, they actually, I guess, reached an agreement with Iran that's going to allow some inspectors to come in. They're going to hopefully verify that they're not ready to blow up the world. And in here to share some thoughts on, well, this is a good thing, bad thing? I've asked our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So this is a good thing, right? I mean, we're going to get some inspectors in, take a look at what's going on, maybe?
I can write a book on this. In fact, I wrote part of this in a book called The MEK, The Terrorists Are Still Amongst Us. This goes back, I lived in Iran. Some of the listeners may not know that, but I lived there in 1978. And then through the Clinton administration and the Bush administration, I and a few other members in Congress were involved with, the issue of should we talk to Iran or not. And the Bush administration, just a tiny shot of history here, was given an agreement where there would be American nuclear inspectors on the ground. They ditched that, Rick. They didn't like it. They had a big argument in the White House. The Cheney people won out, and that went away. And along came then President Obama a few years later and then instituted the Iran nuke deal, which then stopped the amount of centrifuges, took it backwards, which would have happened if Bush had accepted the deal years earlier.
Right.
So we now get to that point where we have the deal canceled in the second year of the Trump administration. Now we are back to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has just cut a deal. They're going to allow inspectors to inspect the Iran facilities for the next 3 months. So it's a temporary move that may become permanent. The answer, in a nutshell, of that long history there is it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. But again, it's one of these things, as you pointed out, we probably could have been to, 15 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. They were offered a deal. The deal was brought actually to my office by the Swiss ambassador to Iran. I called Karl Rove, the architect of the Bush administration. He said, "Is this real?" I said, "It's real." It was brought by Mr. Guleman, the ambassador. They then began to rip Mr. Guleman apart. That was, the Rumsfeld Cheney group. And Rove denied that he ever received it. And then later on, luckily, Colin Powell's chief of staff said, yes, they knew about this document. So way back when, the centrifuges could have been rolled back. But they weren't. They increased. And then were rolled back with the Iran nuclear deal. Then, of course, that deal was cut, and they went forward, and now there'll be inspectors on the ground, and this is not a bad sign. It's a beginning.
No, again, this is another one of those things where, we're a month post-Trump. Good things.
Oh, yes, and this has been a build-up because the president said that Iran would have to come to certain terms. He didn't just reinstitute, and undo the sanctions. That's not what President Biden did. But then he signaled through Blinken, our Secretary of State, to our counterparts in Europe that we're willing to engage. Iran then through the moderates, begins the process. But remember, the clerics don't want to engage. The right-wing hawkish clerics in Iran don't want to do that, but the moderates are trying to do it. So this is again, in my idea of this, Rick, this has taken some big steps in a 3-week period of time.
No, they're huge steps in a short period of time.
Right.
That's a good. We need to be doing huge things. We need to be making leaps and bounds. We got time to catch up for. And speaking of which, today marked a sad moment. We've passed 500,000 dead from the coronavirus. Even I'm taking shots at the administration for things not going smooth enough, fast enough. But evidently, I'm maybe a little. My expectations are really high. Evidently, we're not doing as bad as some other countries.
Well, this has been a mixed bag depending on who you hear. But if you look at the reports today, we are doing okay. Are we where we want to be or need to be? No. Have we made more progress than we thought we made? Yes. So I think that it's not the amount of the vaccine, because we acquired 200 million more doses, and there is a line in the sand where the president wants to have everybody that wants to be vaccinated by July, but it's the distribution network, and that's where it's got to get beefed up probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks of how they do it. And there's some examples out there. They're doing it in Tennessee. Rick, you go in a parking lot, you get your paperwork done by one person, you pull your car up, you get the shot, you sit for 15 minutes. You don't have to worry about social distancing. You're in your car. They check on you. These are the types of things we need to look at to get it going in mass. I think they did 5,000 people in one day in one of the Tennessee towns.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't difficult. I'm just a dumb truck driver, but in this day of technology, there should be a way that I drive up, I see a QR code, I scan the QR code, I fill out my information, it tells me which lane to get in, I stick my arm in a hole, and they jab it with a needle, and I move on, I drive on my way. It should be that quick.
Exactly, and that's what they did in Tennessee. So I think we can learn from other states. Some of the people have taken school gymnasiums where you can move thousands of people versus going to the grocery store where you can sit 4 people an hour. And again, that's great. 4 people got the vaccination, but it's not enough. So again, our amount of vaccine, it seems, has been properly acquired now. Now the distribution method needs to kick in high gear pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things, though, Bob, for me anyway. I look at our reliance on corporate interests. It really has no business being done in a drugstore or a grocery store, for that matter. It has no business. This has no business in those places.
Well, you're right. And when the Biden administration about 2 weeks ago, and I haven't heard much more on it because maybe they realize it's not the way to go, but they had announced, they were going to get a lot more doses to the CVS's and Kroger's of the world, et cetera. They were going to get a lot more doses there. And when they announced it, I thought, okay, you can double the doses. They don't have the space to sit people down. And they also have to still continue to do something that they do, which is to dispense prescriptions to other people.
Right. No, it just seems like it's a bad idea. Because you go back and you see some of I remember as a kid seeing some of the reels of people getting the polio vaccine, and they were just lining people up. You came through it, bang, 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 bang. It was you move through people.
Well, I have a friend. He's very ill. His wife called me. She's alarmed. So I went online and tried through all kinds of pharmacies from one end of Ohio to the other to get him an appointment. Now Ohio State, on the campus of Newark, campus of Ohio State, they're going to do this in mass. That's how he's getting his shot Thursday. I've been trying for 5 days to get him anywhere in Ohio.
No, it's crazy. And, I beat up on Meghan McCain a little bit verbally, obviously, for her thing today about, I'm Meghan McCain. I should be able to, I'm co-host of The View. I should be able to, know when I'm getting this stuff. Look at me. But, she's not wrong. She's not wrong in that, we don't know when we're going to get it. And, there should be a better rollout of this.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that in the next 2 weeks, if they can again, learn from where it has worked in America. This isn't rocket scientist. Where has it worked in mass, and reproduce that in other areas?
Yeah. Now, it's just so that I'm clear. Look, I'm hard on this. I'm going to be hard on this administration for the next 4 years because I have high expectations for them. They should do better. So anybody who thinks, oh, you're just tearing them down, no, I want them to do better.
Right. Again, there's certain areas they have done exceptional job. But when they announced that they were going to, increase this to the pharmacies, I thought, nope, that's going on the wrong track.
Yeah. Now Biden has said by the end of July, huh? So everybody's going to be done by the end of July.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, he's laid a marker in the sand there. So.
No, I mean that's ambitious, and if we mobilize, because I think Fauci talked about how they looked at Operation Warp Speed as kind of like a Manhattan Project kind of thing, and it's exactly how I see it. This is the number one issue right now because we can't get back to sanity, we can't get back to some bit of normal, we can't get back to doing the things that we were used to doing until we get through this.
Well, they're calling it Biden's big summertime verdict because he is saying that by end of July it'll be available to all Americans again who want it. And the poll finds that 3/4 of Americans expect him to pull it off. Now, that's not a political statement. That's the polling numbers. They expect that he will do that. So he doesn't want to get haunted by what happened to Trump.
Yeah.
And he's also trying to, and it notes this in the article, he's trying to bring confidence back, confidence in the government, when there has been none. So this one, they're going to have to, take every good mind they've got and not wait till, May, but in the next 2 or 3 weeks, get that plan out there, get it moving.
No, you're right. But you also don't want a read my lips moment. Read my lips, vaccinated by July, and it not be there.
Oh, exactly.
So you're right. Yeah. Let's talk stimulus. The rescue plan. Did you actually hold out any hope that there would be a Republican who voted for it?
Yes, I actually thought there would be. Yeah, I called this one wrong. I mean, I thought in the House that there would be somebody, maybe one that would do it. So we'll have to see. What they're going to do in the Senate, but I did think there would be at least one.
Is it possible this gets derailed?
Well, it can't, because what has to happen here is now, as it goes to the Senate, and the 10 senators were, over at the White House, and without destroying the bill, they may be able to come to some terms, but here's the bottom line. If they cannot come to those some terms, then they have to do it on their own. If they are short 1 or 2 Democratic votes, they have to get 1 or 2 Republican votes. I mean, there's sort of no in-between, no turn back on this. It has to be done.
I'm looking at someone like Joe Manchin, and I'm going, Joe, I don't get the near attendant thing. I don't get that, but okay, I get you're going to stake your ground there. Also talking about the woman they put up for Interior, there's some pushback on her. He can't hold this up.
Right. I was saying on the appointments, they ought to just kind of go take a break and put his desk in the middle of the Senate and have him go up or down. Right now as it's running, and the appointments are one thing. He's not going to go in mass. I'm talking about Senator Manchin against the nominees. He did, one, and has having some problems with another. But when it comes to the stimulus bill, then that's one that he, I think, would have to, if he's the key vote, I would assume he doesn't want to tank the bill.
Yeah, and I got to imagine that the people of West Virginia need it.
They need it, absolutely.
Just kind of throwing that out there. They need the money, and even a state like West Virginia. The state and local governments need the money.
Right, exactly. So it's one thing if he chooses, to not go along with a couple of nominees, but there'll be a lot of great pressure. And then again, let's say, maybe Susan Collins, I don't know, maybe there will be one Republican. I thought there would be in the House, but let's face something, Rick, one Republican to make up for one Democrat in the Senate, that is a big deal.
That's huge.
That 1 for 1 that's like getting 25 Republican House members.
No, I mean, you get one Republican with the courage to step up and be the one that passes it. That's enormous.
That's big. It's enormous, right?
And I don't. And to be honest, I don't think it's possible. But we'll see how it plays out. And finally, this coming weekend, the big coming out party. Trump's going to give a speech at Crazy Pack.
He is going to, as we know from all the sources that were in the news today, he's going to come out and say that basically he's the guy, he's the 2024 guy, he's back, he's here, he's there, and it's his way. But again, if you look at the Trump Enterprises, the Trump Corporation, that might be an entirely different story. I still will argue, as I've argued for the last 3.5 years, that the Achilles heel is New York. Today was a huge loss for Trump and the Trump companies because of his income tax. I mean, Supreme Court.
Right.
Okay. And as a result of that, I think he's going to have some problems. But until that takes its toll on him, which I do believe it will, he is going to proclaim at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Group, the big meeting, which I think he didn't go to the first time, did he?
No, not the first time, but he's been there. He had that scene where he was hugging the flag in some bizarre way.
Right. So he'll be there and he'll give that speech, and he's going to talk about the fact that he's here.
Yeah, I mean,
show of force, as they say.
I was talking earlier. I had gone to the CPAC back in, I think it was 12. We were there for a day, and I remember going. You could have conversations with people. They weren't too far off the beaten path. It wasn't totally crazy. It was getting there. I don't know how you deal with it today.
Well, also one of the longtime advisors who they didn't name but said that the speech will be, quote, a show of force. His message may be, quote, I may not have Twitter in the Oval Office, but I'm still in charge. And the other theme is payback is his chief obsession, which means the payback is to Republicans.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, the Republicans, if he does that and attacks them and says he is the Republican Party and he's going to go after them, then they have to make a decision where they really want to be as office holders.
Yeah, no, they're gonna sorely wish they didn't convict him. No, it's gonna be. Are you gonna watch the speech?
I probably will watch clips of it.
Yeah, I've decided I'm not gonna miss it. It's on my calendar. I gotta
watch it.
I gotta watch it. When did they go to Orlando? Is this something new?
I don't know. When I used to go to it, of course, to cover it, I would go in D.C. when Ellen Ratner and Talk Media News always covered it. We always covered it in D.C.
Yeah, it was, and I forget that was it the Radisson there.
I've never known it to be. Yeah, it was. That's right. That's where it was.
It was always at the same place.
Right.
And now I saw it was in Orlando. I'm going, is that another give to Trump because Trump doesn't want to leave Florida? I don't know.
Maybe.
Or maybe it's just a state that's crazy enough that's going to allow massive number of people to come breathe all over each other.
True.
We will see. But Bob, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff, our good friend Bob Ney. No, look, I'm looking forward to the speech. I want to see just how much regret the Republican Party is going to have for not doing what they should have done, which was convict him. That's just the reality of it. And this will probably be the first full speech that I sit and watch. I've watched them in pieces, but I think I'm gonna get through the whole one. Unless he gets really off the beaten path. And finally today, New Jersey. The governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, has signed legalized pot into law. That is now legalized and regulated for use by adults 21 years of age and older. It also decriminalizes marijuana and hashish possession. So I guess that's there. Murphy said, our current marijuana prohibition laws have failed every test of social justice, which is why for years I have strongly supported legislation for adult use cannabis. So there you go. New Jersey going to be the new Colorado. I wonder how much tax revenue they'll get from that. And I wonder how far Pennsylvania is behind in doing that as well. So there you go. And maybe the Girl Scouts will be able to sell more cookies, and that will be good for them as well. So yay, good stuff on the horizon. And look, Pennsylvania's, I know Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, who's running for Senate, something he's been big behind, and in the tax angle, there's money in it. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, well, there you go. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Big week ahead of confirmations. Big week ahead on, well, we're going to get that rescue package pushed through. Can't wait to see how that plays out. But thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.